Xavier and Rafik
The
kept his head
elevator
down when
doors
the elevator
slid
doors
open
opened
on the
28th
28th
floor and
floor,
spilled light like a blade
spilling
across the
light
marble.
like a sharp blade
His mop
across the
handle rested
polished
against his
marble.
shoulder with the familiar
Xavier
weight
and
of something that
Rafik
had kept
kept
him
his
standing
head
for
down,
years.
the
He
familiar
could smell
weight of
citrus
the mop
cleaner and the faint
handle
electric scent
resting
of servers
against his
sleeping behind
shoulder, a
glass.
simple tool that
He
had,
thought about the
in
last
many
bill on his kitchen
ways,
table,
kept
the
him
one with the red
standing
stamp,
for
and he
years.
adjusted his pace so his
As
thoughts
he
wouldn't
pushed
outrun
his
his work.
cart forward,
Before
the
we
air
jump back in,
filled with
tell
the
us where you're
clean
from.
scent of
If this
citrus
story
and the
moves you,
faint
please
electric
subscribe.
hum of servers
Tomorrow, I have
sleeping
a special
behind
story for you.
walls of glass.
The building slept
His
away
mind
cities sleep,
drifted to
eyes
the
closed,
last bill
teeth
on his
clenched, a
kitchen
dream of
table,
alarms waiting
the
for
one
dawn
with
to
the
set them
angry
off.
red stamp
Xavier liked it
demanding
best at this hour,
attention.
when the
He
screens dimmed and the
consciously
company's
adjusted
proud
his
logos were just
pace,
softer ghosts
forcing
on the
his
walls.
steps to match the
Vale
rhythm
Meridian
of his
Holdings,
work.
world-beating,
A silent
valuation-shattering,
refusal
the
to
kind
let
of
his
place that
worries
put their motto
outrun
in steel
him.
letters 10 feet tall in
He
the lobby.
focused
We
on the
turn impossible
reflection
into
in the
process.
floor, a man
He'd been
just
turning
trying to
impossible
make
into
it
process
to the
since he was
next day.
16. He
Before we
moved his
jump
cart to
back
the wall
in,
of glass
tell
that
us
looked down on
where
the
you're
news
from.
helicopters 2 blocks
If
away,
this
their
story
blinking
moves
lights like
you,
mechanical
please
fireflies.
subscribe.
The city stretched
Tomorrow,
back at him,
I have
neon
a
arteries,
special story
windows
for
flickering,
you.
river of black rib in the wind pulled tight. He wrung the mop with the rhythm that made his knuckles ache less, then slid it across the floor, bullseyes of clean spreading in perfect crescents. The floor was a lake he was learning to walk on. He didn't hear the second elevator, the private one. The doors opened without sound, and air shifted with the expensive perfume of a life that never waited in line. He caught the reflection first, sharp cheekbones, an asymmetrical bob, the silver glint of a cuff that belonged more to a sculptor than a corporate executive. The reflection looked like a decision someone had already made. Seraphine Cade stepped out of the private elevator like gravity worked differently for her. CO. Legend. Headlines in the flesh. She crossed the distance to Xavier as if it were the last few feet of a runway at a show only she could see, heels silent on marble that remembered everyone else's footsteps but not hers. Mr. Rafik. Her voice was smooth enough to pour. Crosses national borders without a visa. Walk with me. He straightened so slowly the mop didn't drip. Of course. He left the cart against the glass and followed her past the illuminated timeline burning along the wall, acquisitions, patents, awards, every milestone a framed verb. They stopped beneath a sculpture that looked like a meteor had been poured into a net and hung to dry. She positioned herself so the art floated like a halo behind her. There was a trick to power, he had learned from hours of cleaning boardrooms and hearing men talk when they forgot the walls had ears. The trick was to put your body where the story would make you inevitable. You work nights, she said. You keep things in order. That's the job, he said. And you are prompt. Your file says you have never missed a shift. He didn't ask how she knew his file. He didn't tell her that when you are responsible for a mother who wakes at 3 with pain she doesn't report, for a younger brother trying to hold on to a scholarship with fingers skinned by 2 jobs, for an apartment that hums with broken baseboards, you do not miss work. He nodded instead. I arrive. I finish. Seraphine tipped her head, as if evaluating a commodity for defects invisible to the naked eye. Her eyes were the color of things kept in safes. I need a solution to a personal problem, Mr. Rafik. I have determined you will do. He waited. He'd learned the power of open space in a sentence. Let the other person build a bridge you don't have to cross. There's a stipulation in my late father's trust, she said. She didn't look at the city. She looked only at him, as if the city were a screen that would refresh when she glanced its way. By midnight tomorrow, I must be legally married to retain majority control of this company. I will not surrender control. I will not surrender my time to the ritual theater of dinners and compatibility interviews. I will follow the law like a scientist follows the edge of a petri dish. I will do it efficiently. She took one step closer. He smelled a citrus unlike the cleaner, a perfume built to smell like the first slice of a knife into an orange. Marry me, Xavier, she said softly, and then her voice hardened not like metal but like a promise cooling into shape, or you're fired. The marble kept its secrets. The lights hummed, reserving their right to illuminate what came next. He was a janitor. He was the son who counted coins until they squared with rent. He was the brother who learned the 12 swaps on the bus route when the late bus never came. He was the person people did not see until they needed floors to stop carrying footprints. He was 1,000 small obediences soldered together into a man who learned that dignity was a practice. He met her gaze and didn't move. No. She blinked once, as if the software in her brain received unexpected input but would not crash. Perhaps you misheard the second clause. She enunciated each word like she owned the dictionary. Or. You're. Fired. Xavier looked at the ceiling camera, small red, blinking like a pulse. He shifted his body just enough so that the corridor's second camera caught Seraphine's face. He had studied the building the way other men studied escape rooms. He knew which cameras were decoys, which ones flickered, which ones recorded to redundant drives because the board chair had an auditor's paranoia stitched into his suit. I heard you. He let quiet collect around the words like velvet around a jewel. Then he looked past her shoulder toward the security desk at the end of the corridor. Rook Mendoza stood there, square as a vault with arms that knew exactly how heavy doors are. Rook's mouth had the downturn of a man who trusts his eyes more than instruction. He had been kind to Xavier on nights when the trash compactors were jammed and the manuals were written by engineers who had never touched a wrench. He was the closest thing to neutral ground the building had. Rook, Xavier called, voice level, please step over. Bring your body cam. Seraphine's smile was a touch of winter. My conversation with my employee is none of security's concern. Xavier's calm was not a pose. He had found it the way divers find depth by deciding their breath will outlast their fear. I'm contracted through Iridium Clean. Their incident protocol requires witness recording when employment is threatened. And the law requires it when an ultimatum includes coercion tied to a personal relationship. Rook hesitated. The body cam on his shoulder blinked awake like a cautious animal. He walked toward them with the kind of alertness that knows two people can be dangerous in 10 different ways. Seraphine tilted her chin. Mr. Mendoza, please return to your post. Ma'am, Rook said, not moving. He looked at Xavier. He looked at the camera. Ma'am, he repeated, and the second word had more gravel in it. Xavier addressed the lens on Rook's shoulder like it was the only fair judge left open at this hour. For the record, the CEO of Vale Meridian Holdings has just told me, quote, marry me or you're fired. I decline. He turned his head to Seraphine, voice never leaving the steady line it had found. You do not have the authority to terminate me in these circumstances. I'm not your direct employee. And even if I were, your threat constitutes unlawful coercion. So I respectfully invite you to call your legal counsel now and tell them to ring Labor Standards and Iridium Clean's compliance officer. We can resolve this with all three on speaker. Rook's eyebrows climbed as if someone had lifted them on fishing wire. That was the moment that stunned security. Not the legal citations or the word coercion that rolled out of a janitor's mouth like a tool he knew which end to hold. It was the way Xavier stood, as if he had practiced being the calmest person in the room until it became a muscle memory. Seraphine's mouth curved like a blade wearing a smile. Who told you could speak like this? You did, he said. When you threatened me. That made this my concern. For a heartbeat, the corridor held 3 people equal under a red blinking light. Then the world rushed back in, the whispering vents, the distant clunk of an elevator stopping on 14, the city remembering to breathe. Seraphine's voice softened like a violin angled slightly by a musician. You're interesting, she said. The board likes problems that come in neat lines. I like diagonals. She turned her face toward Rook without taking her gaze from Xavier. Escort Mr. Rafik to Conference North. Wait outside. Rook looked at Xavier, then at the CEO who paid his wages and could fold them without creasing. Sir, he asked Xavier, the honorific that only a handful of people ever put in Xavier's direction. It's all right, Xavier said. We'll sit in a room with a table and a speakerphone. That's where these things belong. Seraphine held out an arm to indicate the path that led past the executive lobby where the chairs faced away from one another like estranged spouses. She did not touch him. Xavier appreciated that small concession. He followed. Rook followed Xavier. The door to Conference North opened on a room designed to make decisions look inevitable. The table was a single piece of wood the size of a boat, polished to a gloss that turned overhead light into white rivers. One wall was screen. One was glass. One was water falling down slate behind paneled glass so quietly it was almost a suggestion. The far wall held a whiteboard where someone had once written a formula that looked like the alphabet had been placed under tension. Rook positioned himself by the glass. Seraphine took the head of the table as if the table had been waiting for her spine. Xavier chose a seat with a camera in the corner and Rook's body cam would both record his hands. He folded them loosely so anyone watching later would understand he had arrived with nothing except words. Words were often enough. Seraphine pressed a button on the table and the speakerphone sprouted from the wood like a technological flower. She tapped another control and a number flashed, dialed. It rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Adelaide Noor, the voice said. General Counsel. Seraphine's tone softened by 2 degrees, enough to signify respect. Addie. I have a situation. You'll want to record. Already am, Adelaide replied. Good evening, Mr. Rafiq. So she knows my name, Xavier thought. Of course she does. Seraphine described the stipulation about the trust the way a mathematician presents a proof, without apology for the parts that would unsettle laymen. I require a legal spouse by midnight tomorrow to retain my controlling shares. I prefer a candidate who can keep quiet, sign a temporary arrangement, and walk away discreetly when I no longer require the optics or the trigger clause. Understood, Adelaide said. And the situation? I selected a candidate, Seraphine said, and he declined. I then informed him refusal would cost him his position. He invited me to consult you, labor standards, and our partner Iridium Clean. Silence spread like a spill across the wood. Then Adelaide said, very carefully, on the record, that last part is not ideal. Illegality nested in an efficiency, Xavier offered, and immediately wondered if he had stepped too close to a ledge. Adelaide did not sound offended. Thank you, Mr. Rafiq. Yes. Coercion tied to employment is not just a PR hazard. It is a storm. Ms. Cade, I recommend you withdraw any suggestion tying employment to personal relationship status with this individual, issue a written retraction, and excise yourself from the matter until I speak to the board chair. The board will froth, Seraphine said. They will smell weakness. They will smell my cologne, Adelaide replied, brisk. And I am made of courtrooms. I'll draft the retraction. In the interim, Mr. Rafiq, do you require a security escort home? Xavier looked at Rook. Rook watched him the way a mountain watches weather. I'm fine, Xavier said. I plan to finish my shift. Of course you do, Seraphine murmured. She leaned back, hands steepled, eyes on him as if catalog entries were being typed as she watched. Tell me why you said no. Because my mother raised me to mean what I say, Xavier answered before he could embellish it into something clever. Because it would not be a marriage. Because I won't turn my life into a function of your problem. He paused. He could feel the earth under the building the way a ship's captain feels the keel under water, pressure, direction, something larger than the vessel. Because I don't belong to you. Something like a smile ghosted across Adelaide's voice. That answer will play well in any venue that matters. Seraphine considered him the way surgeons consider maps before they cut. So, you will not consider a legal arrangement with a defined duration and a 7-figure compensation for your family's trouble? Rook coughed, then turned it into a throat clear as if he could move sound furniture around the room without being noticed. Xavier chose his next words like he chose cleaning chemicals. This one safely clears a stain, that one poisons the air. I would consider a universe in which you did not begin by threatening me for refusing, he said. But you did. And now, before anything else, We have to make sure your threat doesn't turn into my termination. Adelaide spoke the way people do when they've already put something heavy in motion. I'm emailing a retraction to your corporate address, Ms. Cade, and to Iridium Clean. Mr. Rafiq, you'll receive a copy through your supervisor by morning. In addition, I'm scheduling a call with the board chair, Galen Armitage, in 2 hours. I require that no one discuss this matter outside of this room and my office until I say otherwise. Seraphine's jaw tightened by a molecular degree. Addie, she said, very quietly, remind Galen who made him relevant last quarter. I will remind him of the law first, Adelaide said. And then of the math of optics. Seraphine ended the call and the room took back its voice. The water behind glass whispered the kind of secrets that only water knows, how to fall and look like it chose to. Why me? Xavier asked. He could have kept the question. He surprised himself by letting it out into the cold bright room where questions are only asked by people who are ready for the truth. Seraphine drummed one fingernail against the table like a metronome for a song only she could hear. You are invisible, she said. Until you are not. You move through this building seeing things no one else sees. You know where the cameras blink and where the managers leave their spreadsheets open when they step out to perform crises in the hallway. You arrive on time. You finish. And you do not ask for favors. You would have been quiet for a price. I prefer quiet. I prefer honest, he said. She tipped her head in acknowledgement not of respect but of accuracy. We prefer different instruments. It does not mean we're playing different songs. She stood. The motion was its own argument. Finish your shift, Mr. Rafiq. Rook, make sure no one disturbs him. We'll speak again. There's nothing more to speak about, Xavier said, and surprised himself twice in 1 hour. Seraphine's smile was a blueprint. There always is. She left the room the way she had entered the floor, like the air had been shaped to fit her. The door closed behind her with a sigh that might have been the room remembering how to breathe without her in it. Rook stayed at the glass. For several long seconds neither man said anything, because in buildings like these even silence took notes. Then Rook exhaled through his nose. Brother, he said finally, not as family but as respect, you got brass in your bones. I have a mother with more pain than pride, Xavier said. That's heavier. Rook turned the body cam off, then on again, then off. He looked out over the city and spoke without turning his head. You want to hear a thing? Off the record? Sure, Xavier said. Ms. Cade is a storm, Rook said. But the ones you watch are the ones who like standing in the rain. She doesn't. She builds roofs. You pushed her into a hall where there ain't any and told her to decide whether to get wet. That's what stunned me. He turned, finally, and his face had the kind of concern that men show each other when they already counted the exits. Be careful. The board's colder than her. Colder? Storms you can see coming, Rook said. Ice breaks the first step. Xavier finished his shift. It felt like doing pull-ups in a room where the oxygen had thinned by 1% and no one had told him. He cleaned the fingerprints from a conference room door, and his own hands trembled once and then understood they were allowed. He emptied bins, replaced liners, scrubbed away the coffee circles that had survived 6 other attempts because people think rings are forever until they meet solvent. At 3:12 a.m., on the 18th floor, the elevator doors opened and a young analyst he'd seen once, Noor Sajwani, neat hair, blue lanyard, stepped out with a stack of spreadsheets against her chest and an expression like someone who had read bad news written in columns. She saw Xavier and paused. Are you the one who told the CEO no? She asked, whispering because buildings teach you that voices are a currency. How many people know? He asked. Only the ones pretending not to, she said. She glanced at the ceiling camera, then back at him. Something in her shoulders softened in relief, like seeing someone else breathe let her lungs remember how. Good, she said. Thank you. For what? For saying what a lot of us can't, she said. They think we'll eat any sentence if they put enough zeros before the decimal. Some of us are hungry, yes. Some of us are also alive. He smiled despite the tremor of adrenaline that was now deciding to arrive late. How long have you been here? 14 months, she said. Long enough to know that loyalty is measured in sacrifice and stock options you can't afford to exercise. She adjusted the spreadsheets. You should get a lawyer. Not because you did anything wrong. Because you did something right. He nodded. She started to turn, then hesitated. My aunt, she said, works with a labor cooperative. They do sliding scale. They know what it's like to go up against people who think time is theirs to schedule. She produced a card from somewhere only the prepared keep cards. You didn't ask, but I'm offering. Thank you, he said. He put the card in the one pocket that never lost anything. How did you hear about it? What happened upstairs? She studied his face the way mathematicians study variables they wish were constants. Someone will tell you tomorrow, she said. There was a meeting. Late. People who like rooms without windows. The chair looked angry enough to invent a new facial expression. I only caught the altitude of the voices when I passed the stairwell. It felt like weather. Weather, he thought. He was learning to predict it by smell. By 5:30, his back ached the way it always did and more. He clocked out. The city outside had begun to turn from black velvet to something paler. Dawn didn't arrive here. It negotiated. Xavier walked the 3 blocks to the bus, hands in his jacket pockets, the card Nora had given him tucked into the ribcage of his wallet like a small, hard heart. By the time he unlocked the apartment, the building had decided it was morning. The neighbor's radio murmured in a language that made sorrow sound like a throat clearing. The hallway smelled like cilantro and detergent. Inside, everything was organized the way poverty is when it is managed by someone proud. His mother was awake, because pain did not bend to the clock. She sat at the kitchen table with her cup of tea in her bravery. You are late, she said, which was how she said, I worried you would not come back, and how she said, I trust you did what needed doing. I am safe, he answered, which was how he said, the world tested me tonight, and how he said, I still belong to us. She looked at him for the extra second that mothers look when their sons arrive wearing storms that haven't shaken out yet. She did not ask, she would wait until he offered. He kissed her forehead. The skin was warm but the warmth felt like something the body had borrowed. Sleep, she said. Dream of something that buys a house. He slept 4 hours and woke because habit is a set of invisible hands. He made eggs the way his mother liked, the edges crisp like a good decision, and coaxed a laugh out of his younger brother, Camille, who measured the world in goals and deadlines he recited like prayers. Then he called the number on the card. The labor cooperative's office sat above a grocer that sold more types of rice than he had known existed. The air inside smelled like paper and coffee and the belief that systems can be read and rewritten. A woman with a streak of white in her hair who introduced herself as Advocate Miriam took notes that sounded like respect. Your calm saved you, she said, scribbling. And the cameras saved your calm. She wrote in a rectangle and drew arrows that matched them to laws. We'll request preservation of footage immediately. We'll enroll you in whistleblower protections, not because this is that yet, but because proximity matters. You'll receive a letter by 5 p.m. It will make your employer nervous in the correct way. She looked up over her glasses. Do not answer any calls from the company without me on the line. I have to finish my shift tonight, he said. I can't not show. You'll show, she said. You'll do your work like you were born to do it, and if anyone breathes on you sideways, you'll call me. Meanwhile, we'll draft a statement for labor standards that says what happened in words that fly straight. She slid a glass of water toward him like a prize. You did the hard part alone. Let us do the part with paperwork. He left the cooperative with a folder under his arm that felt heavier than the mop but better for his back. The phone in his pocket buzzed a dozen times by the time he reached the bottom of the stairs. He checked, unknown numbers, 2 withheld, 1 with the corporate exchange and an extension he didn't recognize. He let them go to voicemail. He listened to the first. "This is Galen Armitage," a voice like an antique pen said, "old money in syllables." "Call me." He didn't. His phone buzzed again. Text from an unsaved number, "Please confirm you'll attend a meeting at 2 p.m. in Conference North. HR and counsel present. Security will escort." He stared at the text. His chest was tight in the way of men who carry someone else's anger like borrowed armor. He texted Advocate Miriam instead, "Meeting request 2 p.m. Conference North. HR plus counsel. Advice?" Her reply arrived like a gavel that liked him. "Text me the number. Consent to attend with counsel by phone. Record if allowed by law, if not, take written notes. Do not sign anything." At 1:42, he walked through the lobby under the steel letters and felt each verb in his bones as if the sentence had been tailored to him for the first time. "We turn impossible into process." Maybe. Or maybe the people who clean the verbs were the ones turning. Rook met him by the turnstiles. The security chief's mouth had found a grin since last night, a careful one that didn't expose too much of any emotion to cameras. "You good?" "Define good," Xavier said. "Breathing and not fired," Rook said. "Today that's a C+." He leaned toward Xavier like a shield tilting between him and the lobby. "He's inside," he said. "The chair. And her. And HR. I'll be right outside the door. I don't do law, but I do wait." They rode up together. Rook swiped access no one had swiped for Xavier before. The elevator felt smaller than yesterday and more precise. The 28th floor doors opened on clean marble, the meteor sculpture, the halo he had refused. Conference North held 4 people when they entered. Adelaide Noor sat with a legal pad and a patience that didn't fidget. Beside her, an HR director Xavier recognized but could not name, Angles, beige cardigan, voice that called policies by first name. Across the table, Galen Armitage, board chair, a man whose suit wore him back and whose eyes measured not men but margins. At the head of the table, Seraphine Cade looked like an answer waiting for the right question to unlock it. Adelaide nodded when she saw Xavier. "Mr. Rafiq. Thank you for coming. For the record, we have your advocate on the line." "On," Miriam's voice said through the speaker, practical and warm as a good pair of boots. "And recording." Galen folded his hands, his knuckles like carved ivory. "Let's be plain," he said, and his voice was the opposite of Seraphine's, not smooth, but the sound of money that's forgotten what paper looks like. "This firm cannot be compromised by personal theatrics." "Agreed," Adelaide said. "Which is why we're here to assure Mr. Rafiq that his employment is not contingent upon any personal decisions, and to document the retraction of any prior suggestion otherwise." Galen looked as if the word retraction were a stain someone had found on his cuff after he'd taken off his jacket. "This company does not retract," he said. "It clarifies." "Legally," Adelaide said, "we retract." Galen examined Xavier the way a gemologist examines a stone reported to be worth less than the labor it would take to cut it. "You are a contractor," he said. "I am a person," Xavier said. A silence like a new door happened. Adelaide slid a single page across the table toward Xavier. At the top, retraction of statement and employment assurance. At the bottom, her signature waited beside a space for his to acknowledge receipt. "This does not require your signature," she said. "But if you sign that you received it, the record will be tidy. If you do not wish to sign, I will email it. Either way, the retraction stands." He read the page. The words did what good words do, they made things smaller and clearer. He slid the paper back without signing. "Please email," he said. "I don't sign things in rooms like this." Adelaide's mouth twitched at the corner. "Understood." Galen leaned back, and that small shift had the weight of a floorboard that knows where to creak. "Now that we have performed our obligations," he said, "Ms. Cade, you will leave the room. HR will continue." Seraphine did not move. "No," she said. Galen's eyebrow rose a millimeter, which in his language was profanity. "Excuse me?" "No," she repeated, as if testing the word for balance. She looked at Xavier, not at the board chair. "I owe Mr. Rafik one more sentence." Miriam's voice came crisp through the speaker. "He is not required to hear it." "It is not a requirement," Seraphine said. "It is an offer." She turned her body very slightly toward Xavier, enough that everyone else became periphery. The water wall whispered. The camera recorded. The building held its breath in a way only marble can. "I will not threaten you again," she said. "I will not tie anything you need to anything I want. But I will tell you the truth, I require a spouse by tomorrow midnight. I require it because my father built a ring around this company with money and called it trust. The key is absurd. The key is a ring on a finger. I will not marry a man who thinks I am a ladder. I will not marry a woman who thinks I am a shield. I will not marry a person who asks for the keys to the vault before they ask me what time I wake up. I require someone I can stand next to at a table like this and not feel like I'm negotiating with an enemy." She let the words breathe. "I will not ask you again. But if you think of a reason to say yes that is not money or fear, call me." Galen scoffed so gently it registered only on instruments. "This is over," Adelaide said, authoritative as a closing binder. "Meeting adjourned unless HR has housekeeping." HR leaned in, scent of policy rising. "Mr. Rafik, we will schedule a courtesy check-in next week. Please note that retaliation of any kind is prohibited. If you experience anything resembling it, report immediately to me, to Ms. Noor, or to your advocate." She slid a glossy card across the table with her email, her cell, and a QR code shaped like a compliance lecture. Rook opened the door from the outside before anyone inside moved, the way a good guard knows rooms behave like liquids when poured into corridors. He looked at Xavier, who nodded that he was intact enough to be transported. Outside, the corridor felt bigger. Rook looked like he wanted to punch a wall and apologize to it afterward. "How bad?" he asked. "Not bad," Xavier said. "Just cold." "Cold can be clean," Rook said. "Or it can be a freezer. You watch for the frost." Xavier finished the day the way a man finishes a long run, leg by leg, breath by breath. He cleaned under chairs that had heard secrets. He wiped a ring of coffee someone would blame on an assistant. He passed Seraphine once in the hallway and they did not speak. Their eyes met in the way of fencers, acknowledgement that the other had arrived ready and left without a wound that showed. At 10:07 p.m., as he was loading the mop heads into the washer in the service corridor, the fire alarms screamed. They weren't the cautious whoop-whoops of drills or the soft cruel beeps of machines that only warn. They were the kind that call the dead back long enough to evacuate. The strobes turned the hallway into a white-red river. The elevator shut its mouth. Rook's voice cracked through the PA, "Level 25, smoke report." "Repeat, L25 smoke report. All floors evacuate by stairwell." "This is not a drill." Xavier grabbed the door with the out-of-service sign and ran for the stairs. On 27, a woman in heels stumbled, and he took her weight without asking, half carrying her down a flight until she found her breath and nodded that she had her ankles back. He kept moving. The stairwell pulsed with bodies trying not to panic by following instructions. On 25, the air changed. Smoke has a taste. It tastes like promises things make when they turn to carbon. He pushed through the door to the 25th floor into a corridor fogging fast. Sprinklers ticked like rain on a tin roof 2 rooms over. An emergency light made the smoke look like a ghost that had decided to set down roots. Somewhere, someone shouted, somewhere else, someone coughed the human version of an alarm. "Anyone there?" Xavier called. "Security." "Call out." "Here." A voice, female, not frightened, but threaded tight, answered from the far corner suite. "I can't open the server room, override failed." He ran. The floor plan lived in his head from a year of cleaning spaces most people only visited. The corner suite was a data closet now, repurposed for a subsidiary project he had never been invited to understand. The door's glass panel showed a red light and a room filling with smoke from some machine that had decided to burn its heart out. Seraphine Kate stood at the panel with her jacket off and the emergency override pressed in with the kind of pressure people reserve for prayer. Her eyes were wet at the corners from the smoke or from the choice she would not make yet. She looked at him through the glass and everything that had happened in the last 20 hours rearranged itself around a new fact. The CEO had stayed on the floor that smelled like danger. "The auxiliary lock is fused," she said, voice low because smoke makes everyone reverent. "I need that door." "What's inside?" he asked, already shrugging out of his hoodie to wrap around his hand. "People," she said. "2 engineers." She coughed. "In a rack that will cost a lawsuit if it dies." He took the hoodie, wrapped it twice around his fist, and slammed his weight against the glass panel. It spidered. He slammed again and a corner gave like a stubborn opinion. He hit it a third time and the glass broke in a shrug that stole skin from his knuckles through the cloth. He reached in, cut his wrist on a shard, found the manual bolt, and wrenched. The lock surrendered with a sound like an oath. "Back," he said, "because doors bite when they're opened improperly." He pulled it wide. Heat rolled out as if someone had opened an oven that had been lying about how hot it was. 2 figures emerged from the gray, Kaido from cybersecurity, pale and wild-eyed, and Mariella from systems, jaw set at an angle that said she'd stand between a fire and a server if asked. Xavian put an arm under Kaido's shoulder and pulled him into the corridor. Seraphine took Mariella like she'd been trained by a world that never lets you hand someone else your emergencies. They moved as a unit toward the stairwell. Behind them, the server rack protested by flashing red and letting off one last belch of smoke like a dragon deciding to age. The sprinklers, finally convinced this was their affair, blessed the room. Steam turned the smoke into a thick modesty veil. They reached the stairwell. The air was cleaner there though the alarm still clawed at ears. Rook appeared 20 steps up, a triangle of safety in a black uniform. He saw Xavian's bleeding wrist and swore softly. "You all right?" "Bandage later," Xavian said. "These 2 first." Rook took Kaido. Seraphine still had Mariella's arm. For a moment no one moved because standing between danger and the door is a sacred geometry and people sometimes admire it without meaning to. Then Rook began moving downward, his mass creating a current others followed. On the 15th floor, a paramedic team took Kaido and Mariella from them and performed the ritual of competence that makes everyone breathe again. The alarm subsided stairwell by stairwell, like a great animal choosing to sleep in pieces. They gathered in the lobby under the steel letters as if meaning could shelter them. Galen Armitage stood to the side with a phone to his ear speaking in a tone that suggested the fire was a personal insult. HR hovered with clipboards that had appeared from the same space where they keep policies. Adelaide arrived with hair out of place for the first time anyone had seen since law school. She looked at Xavian's wrist, at Seraphine's smoke-smudged face, and the triage she performed was not medical. It was narrative. "What happened?" she asked, voice more precise now that adrenaline had given her a metronome. "Server room lock fused," Seraphine said. "He broke the panel. Manual release. 2 engineers, both conscious." She nodded toward Xavian. "He went first." "Of course he did," Adelaide said. She looked at Rook. "We need the footage. Every angle." "Already queued," Rook said. Galen ended his call. He looked at Xavian as if seeing him as a variable that had moved into the equation without permission. "You're bleeding on my floor," he said, and then, perhaps remembering there were other people in the room, added, "Get him patched." A paramedic taped Xavian's wrist and asked him if he'd feel okay being a hero for a few minutes longer while they checked his lungs. He nodded. Seraphine stood a few feet away, hands on hips, head bowed. Firelight still lived in the sheen of her eyes. She looked up as if she had heard him decide something he hadn't said yet. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," he said. Galen approached like a man approaching an untrained animal with a treat and a leash. "Mr. Rafik," he said, "your actions tonight are commendable. This company rewards commitment." He glanced at Seraphine and then back at Xavian. Ms. Kate informs me you were presented with an improper ultimatum. Consider it erased. In its place, consider an offer, a promotion to facilities coordinator on the day shift with a commensurate salary increase. We appreciate people who keep their heads. The lobby murmured, a human sound, surprise passing between suits and uniforms like an electrical current. Xavier didn't speak. He looked at Seraphine. She looked at him the way people look at rivers they know they must cross again and are calculating which stones will hold a foot. Rook's radio crackled. Mendoza, a young voice said, nervous, you need to see this. East Loading Bay. Now. Rook's eyes snapped toward the hall that led to the service elevators. He touched Xavier's elbow with two fingers that said come if you can and moved fast in a way large men are not expected to move until there is a reason. Xavier followed. Seraphine followed because power hates not knowing. Adelaide followed because lawyers hate surprises. The four of them cut through a corridor that smelled like cardboard and secrets. They hit the loading bay doors at a jog. The bay door yawned open tonight. The city had returned to pretending it was not full of machines comparing themselves. A security officer barely old enough to rent a car pointed with a hand that shook. A black sedan idled at the edge of the bay, exhaust curling like a thought someone didn't finish. The driver's door hung open. Inside, on the passenger seat, a single white envelope rested like a chosen stone. Rook approached first, body between the car and everyone else. He peered in, cursed under his breath, and then stepped aside just enough for the others to see. The envelope had Xavier written on it in a hand he recognized from the retraction page and from contracts that had rearranged the city. Elegant, efficient, unafraid of the edges of letters. Is it yours? Rook asked Seraphine without looking away from the envelope. She shook her head. My paper, she said. Not my hand. She looked at Adelaide, whose mouth had become what mouths become when they are busy turning possibilities into bullet points. Do not touch, Adelaide said. Rook, call the police. Xavier, step back. Everyone, step back. She eyed the car the way chemists eye beakers they didn't label themselves. We don't know if this is theater or threat. The young guard swallowed. It rolled in 5 minutes ago, he said. No one driving. Neutral gear. We were with evac on the other side. Cameras caught it. Then the siren stopped and we heard the engine. Whoever did this wanted us to find it now, Seraphine said. Wanted him to find it now. Xavier looked at his name on the envelope. If fear has a voice, it is not the scream. It's the quiet when you realize you are being addressed by someone who has already measured your breath. The police sirens announced themselves in the distance, a second act. Rook kept everyone at the line painted on the floor meant for forklifts. Adelaide narrated into her phone for the record. Seraphine stood a half step behind Xavier, which meant something he did not yet have the words for. The sirens cut. Officers moved with competence that likes being watched. They photographed. They gloved. They opened the door further, lifted the envelope, and sliced it with a small neat blade. One officer read, eyes flicking, then looked up. It's a marriage certificate, he said. Partially filled. Bride, Seraphine Kate. Groom, Xavier Rafik. Witness line blank. Date, tonight. And, he paused, then read aloud the last line printed across the bottom in a different ink, darker, angrier. Or your job. Seraphine exhaled through her teeth. So the past has decided to cosplay the present, she said softly, but her eyes had narrowed in a way that suggested she was indexing enemies. The officer looked at Xavier. Do you know who would do this? Xavier shook his head. His heart did 2 hard thuds like someone had knocked on a door from the inside. He remembered the smoke on 25, the fused lock, the smell of a server trying to turn itself into a story. He remembered Galen's eyes that measured cost, not people. He remembered how quickly rumors had traveled floors where people swore they didn't know each other. A second officer opened the glove compartment. Inside, a business card with no name, only a phone number, and on the back, A single word cut into the paper with a sharp thing, midnight. The officer held it up in a gloved hand. Whoever delivered this wants an answer. Xavier stared at the card as if it might begin to explain itself if he was patient enough. He felt Seraphine's gaze on him like a light through smoke. He imagined for a strange improper second what it would be to say yes, not to the coercion, but to a human who had decided to stand in a burning floor with her people. Then he remembered the first sentence she had said to him that wasn't his name. "Marry me or you're fired." Some sentences you cannot untell. Adelaide's phone vibrated. She glanced, frowned, and turned the screen so only she could see. Whatever she read moved something under her face like a shadow that knew the map better than the sun. She looked up at Seraphine and then at Xavier. "I need both of you back upstairs," she said, voice lower than the sirens had been but somehow louder. "We have a bigger problem. Two, actually." She pocketed the phone. Someone just filed a petition in court to challenge Ms. Cade's capacity to lead under the trust's marriage clause. Anonymous. And, she exhaled through her nose, a lawyer's version of swearing. A wire just hit Iridium Clean's account. A retainer to terminate Mr. Rafiq's contract for cause. It's signed by someone with a board-level credential code. Rook's head snapped toward the elevator. "Who?" "Not in a text," Adelaide said. "Not in this loading bay." The officer with the envelope cleared his throat. "We'll need statements. We'll impound the vehicle. We'll pull every frame of footage." "Do," Adelaide said, and she was already walking, already pulling air behind her like a cloak. "Rook, lock down access to 25 in the executive suite." "Xavier, with me." Seraphine, she paused, turned, and measured the CEO she worked for and defended. "Do not be alone with anyone you cannot fire." Seraphine nodded once. She fell into step with them, equal measure of fury and focus. The building swallowed them in corridors that felt like veins, pumping them back to the heart. Xavier's bandage itched. The elevator rose with the efficiency of money. His phone buzzed in his pocket, unknown number. He let it buzz. Then he felt it vibrate again, and this time a text flashed across the screen before he could decide. A photo of his mother's building. A timestamp, now. And below it, one sentence. "Do the right thing." His stomach dropped as if the elevator had forgotten a floor. He met Seraphine's eyes at the exact second she looked up from her own screen. Her face had paled in a way he hadn't seen even in the smoke. "Xavier," she said. "They sent me the same photo." The elevator chimed their floor. The doors opened on light and art and glass that had last night reflected an ultimatum and tonight reflected something worse. Rook's voice crackled over the radio, hard as a thrown key. "All units," he said, "we have a credible threat against employee family. Lock all entrances. No one in or out without my say." The hallway stretched in front of them like a question. The phone in Xavier's hand buzzed again. Same number. New message. A video this time, a slow pan up his mother's window to a shape behind curtains that might be a person and might be a shadow practicing. The video ended on the word midnight stamped across the screen. The three of them stood in a triangle under the meteor sculpture, its metal net holding a piece of heaven that had been captured and hung for show. The building waited. The city held its breath. Xavier swallowed. He thought of the law, and of locks, and of people who use both to keep others in their place. He thought of the word yes and the word no and how both can be weapons or blessings depending on the hands that lift them. He looked at Seraphine. She looked at him. Adelaide looked between them and at the clock on the wall, and the clock, impolite thing that it was, said what clocks always say. "Time's up." Up. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The elevator's doors parted and the corridor's light held steady, but Xavier felt the floor tilt inside his ribs. The photo of his mother's building still burned on his phone, timestamp, now. The word midnight sat under it like a fuse waiting for a hand. "Stay with me," Adelaide said, already walking, voice narrowed to the shape of a plan. We don't run toward a trap. We put a net over it. My mother, Xavier said, and the word opened a room behind his ribs where oxygen had to earn its way in. Seraphine had gone pale, not the brittle blank of corporate composure, pale like someone who had remembered that every power has a door in it where people live. Rook, she said into her radio, no tremor, full protective detail to the Rafik residence. 2 cars. Body cams on. Police liaison notified. Doorbell cam scraped for the last 2 hours. If anyone touches that building who isn't delivering bread, I want their name before they reach the curb. On it, Rook said. His voice came back compressed, accelerated, already in motion. Victor and Lena rolling. Patrol notified. We'll keep Mama safe. Adelaide's phone chimed, the encrypted tone that meant Law had entered the chat. She scanned the screen. We have the account code that authorized Iridium Clean's termination retainer, she said. Board credentials used from the executive suite router at 9:14 p.m. Either someone's very stupid or very sure of themselves. Galen? Seraphine asked, but it wasn't really a question. The question was, who would break a city with that much grace in it and call it efficiency? Too obvious, Adelaide said. He's arrogant but not careless. Could be a proxy code. Could be someone borrowing his shadow. She looked at Xavier. And the car? The police have the envelope, Xavier said. He heard how odd the sentence sounded, as if he'd misplaced a letter rather than picked one up off a passenger seat that may as well have been a stage. Inside, a partially filled marriage certificate. My name. Her name. And, or your job. Adelaide nodded once like a metronome agreeing with a melody. Then our path is clear. We preserve evidence, we protect the vulnerable, and we deny the premise. She looked at Seraphine. And if you still intend to satisfy the trust's requirement, we do it without turning a human into collateral. Seraphine met Xavier's eyes. Something in them had changed since the smoke, like a glass wall she'd kept for years had learned about heat. I can't give this company to the kind of person who would threaten a mother, she said quietly. I won't. But I won't force you, either. Good, he said. It came out harsher than he'd meant, iron scraping against iron. We stop them. Then we decide. The 3 of them moved, Adelaide stride all angles of law, Seraphine's pace the quiet acceleration of someone who's memorized triage, Xavier's steps measuring the ground like he was making sure it stayed beneath him. They cut through the floor toward a narrow operations room that Rook used when problems needed a roof over them. Inside, the air tasted like dust and plans. A wall of monitors divided into squares, lobbies, loading bays, stairwells. Rook's team crowded the consoles, their faces lit by the moving gray of a building watching itself. Rook pointed with 2 fingers tattooed with scars. Left screen, loading bay feed. Right, East Alley. Malik's scrubbing plate reads. Victor's 2 blocks from the Rafik residence. A map glowed, dots moving like controlled stars. Xavier watched the 2 blue icons roll toward his mother's street while the word midnight ticked over in his head with each second's click. Victor's body cam switched to live, apartment hallway, fluorescent hum, door number and frame. Approaching, Victor said. He knocked with his knuckles, then with the authority that comes from not wanting to scare the people you protect. Mrs. Rafik? Security. Your son sent us. A bolt scraped. The door opened. She filled the frame, small, shawl, eyes like a question deciding whom to trust. Mama, Xavier said into the mic before he could be told that protocols forbid it. It's me. Don't be afraid. Her face softened like a knot coming undone. I am not, she said. I am angry that someone thinks I should be. She stepped back to let Victor and Lena in. You will eat. I made parathas. Danger can wait if men are hungry. Rook coughed a sound that might have been a laugh if it had been given more time to prepare. Queen, he said under his breath. Lena scanned the windows, the fire escape, the corridor outside. All clear, she said. She looked at Xavier's mother and lowered her voice. "Ma'am, we're going to sit tight with you for a bit, if that's okay." "It is not okay," she said, and then she smiled, and in the smile was every refusal she'd had to make without witnesses. "It is necessary." "Tea?" The room exhaled, the operations room, the building, something in Xavier's sternum that had clenched around a clock. He put a hand against the console to steady himself and found Seraphine's hand there too, fingers braced on the same edge of wood. They did not move away. They did not look at each other. It was enough to know the other's hand was a fact. "Now," Adelaide said. "The petition." She pulled it up on the screen, anonymous, filed in evening court, full of elegant poison. It asserted that the trust's marriage clause had been activated by public rumor of coercion, that any marriage entered into now would be suspect as a condition of control, that the court should appoint a temporary conservator for the shares until a hearing. They filed it to flood the room with smoke while they cut the lights, Adelaide said. If it sticks for 48 hours, they can yank 3 deals off the table and break the spine of next quarter on purpose. Then they claim they had to do it to stabilize leadership. Can we stop it? Seraphine asked, not as a woman who fears losing power, but as one tallying the layoffs that would ripple outward like cracks in glass. Yes, Adelaide said. But not by behaving exactly as they predict. If you marry in a room with witnesses who wear suits and cameras, they'll argue it's sham and succeed in the press even if they fail in court. If you do not marry, they claim the trust trips and call a vote at 12:01. We have to step where they didn't lay traps. Where is that? Xavier asked. Adelaide's eyes slid to him. In the one place they didn't imagine exists here, consent and transparency. She tapped the petition. We will file a counter, that Ms. Kate has refrained from marrying under coercion, that any threats came not from her, but against her and a third party, and that she refuses to be coerced into not marrying by such threats. We will request a protective order preventing interference with personal decisions. And if, she paused. The word if carried the weight of a bridge being inspected at night. If, Seraphine said, we choose to marry. Adelaide didn't flinch. Then we do it only when 2 conditions are met, your will is express and recorded, and Mr. Rafiq's will is express and recorded. Not because a clause demands it. Because you both decide. Different sentence. Different story. Xavier's phone buzzed. Another message, a live stream window he did not open. He forced his thumb to stay still. They want us to panic, he said. To answer them with speed instead of sense. Rook's radio crackled again. Chief, a guard's voice said, we've got something else. East Alley camera just caught a figure switching plates on a sedan. Face mask. But the gate, Chris from maintenance says it looks like Hollis. Hollis? Adelaide repeated. The CFO's fixer? Contractor, Rook said. Unlicensed in his soul. Licensed everywhere else. He pulled up the alley cam. The figure moved with the loose-hipped confidence of men who believe doors owe them a hinge. He's bold, Rook said. Or dumb. Seraphine reached for the edge of the console until her knuckles whitened. He used to work for my father, she said softly. And then for anyone who thought they were my father. Then we feed him his own plan, Adelaide said. Her tone shifted into that strange tempo people use when they are at once furious and delighted by the clarity of a fight. We invite him to his theater. We script the 3rd act. She turned to Xavier. He wants midnight. Give him midnight. Send a reply from a number we can control, you win. We sign. Loading bay. Alone. Alone? Rook rumbled, already shaking his head. With the kind of alone that includes lenses, Adelaide said. And state witnesses. She looked at Seraphine. We'll position 2 patrol units outside the camera's arc. We'll put our own eyes inside. He thinks he's staging a coerced marriage. We're staging extortion, coercion, and conspiracy. He hands us the pen on camera, and the DA's office takes it from there. Xavier's mouth was dry in that useless way saliva fails when you need words to be higher grit. What if he doesn't show? Then we still win, Adelaide said. Because the ask itself is evidence. But he'll show. Men like that don't waste a chance to watch their work from the front row. She softened, the way a blade softens when it knows it will still cut. I won't ever tell you what to decide about your life. I will tell you, we are not going to let someone point at your mother and then at a line on a document and call it choice. The rest of the hour poured itself into preparation. Rook briefed the police in a language he spoke better than legalese, threat vectors, choke points, angles. Adelaide drafted and filed the counter that would become the spine of a future class in law school if the city wanted to teach people how to be brave on paper. Seraphine made 2 calls that did not sound like calls a CEO makes when they think about optics, they sounded like calls a person makes when they care who sleeps and who doesn't. One to a private clinic, ask no questions, build a foundation, send a van to Mrs. Rafiq with 2 nurses and a portable monitor. One to a dean at a university, hold a scholarship open for a boy named Camille, because sometimes the world needs to reassure a family that it can imagine them a year from now. Xavier wanted to refuse all of it because gratitude felt like debt and debt felt like gravity. He did not. He let the offers be what they were, gestures not at him, but at the people who would be hurt if he made his life an island. At 11:21 p.m., his phone lit again. Unknown number. We're watching your mother's window. Don't be clever. Xavier typed, you'll have what you want. Midnight. Loading bay. Alone. The reply arrived before his thumbs could leave the screen, good boy. Rook read it over his shoulder and made a sound like a vow being forged. I'll carry the cuffs myself, he said. Use 2 pairs, Xavier said, surprising himself with the way humor arrived as a shield at the edge of fear. He looks like he can slip one. At 11:49, with the building quieter than a church that has sold its pews, Xavier walked toward the loading bay. The camera above the far door blinked its small red dot. Somewhere beyond the roll-up gate, night pressed its ear to the city. He wore a plain black jacket with a mic behind the collar. The badge on his belt would open any door Rook had persuaded to love him for one evening. Seraphine stepped out from the shadow of a column. She shouldn't have been there, Adelaide would say so, but she was, and her eyes made an argument that words couldn't carry. I won't be in the frame, she said. But I won't be 20 floors away. You shouldn't be here, he said. And you shouldn't have had to be in this building in the first place, she said. And yet. She looked at his hand. How's the wrist? Still mine, he said. Good, she said. Keep it that way. Adelaide's voice whispered in his ear. Units in position. Cam live. When he speaks, answer minimally. Do not agree to anything except to listen. If he hands you a pen, do not lift it. If he tries to touch you, step back. Rook, if he approaches within 2 feet, you move. The roll-up door lifted 4 slats with a judder that sounded like an old song remembering its chorus. A sedan rolled in, lights off, coasting the way guilty cars coast. It stopped. The driver's door opened. Hollis stepped out, solid, clean jacket, face made less by the kind of mask men wear when they've forgotten they have one underneath. He carried a folder with the careful weight of a religious item. Mr. Rafiq, he said. His voice was too friendly, the counterfeit of kindness that comes from copying rather than practicing. Midnight's a romantic hour. Where's the proof my family is safe? Xavier asked. The question came like a rung in a ladder, you did not skip it if you wanted to reach the roof. Hollis smiled without moving his cheeks. He lifted his phone and turned it, showing a live view of the street outside Xavier's mother's building. All quiet, he said. For now. His thumb hovered over the screen the way a man's might hover over a bug he intends to crush for sport. Let's not disturb the peace. You made the fire? Xavier asked, keeping his tone bored. If you deny someone the stage directions they wrote themselves, they will sometimes forget their lines. Hollis chuckled. Oh, we don't make fires, he said. We notice when the wiring's been neglected. He patted the folder. Now. A signature. We can all go home. What is it to you? Xavier asked. Why do you care who puts a ring on a finger? Hollis's eyes cooled 2 degrees. Because people pay, he said. And because I was asked to ensure the world keeps turning in a profitable direction. You wouldn't understand. I mop the floor that direction walks on, Xavier said. I understand. Hollis's smile flickered. He took a pen from his pocket with the flourish of a magician with a single trick. I admire your composure, he said. But midnight has this habit of becoming 101. Let's not tempt time. He opened the folder and laid the marriage certificate on the trunk, smoothing it like a sail. His finger tapped the line under Xavier's name. Xavier took a step forward, as if to read. The mic caught the soft rasp of paper. Adelaide's whisper in his ear, now. Xavier lifted his gaze. No, he said. Because this is not a choice. Hollis's head tipped, the way predators tip when prey doesn't run. You think there are choices, he said. There are only moments when you say yes before a worse thing says yes for you. He moved closer. Sign it. Xavier stepped back. Say your client's name, he said. Say it so the mics can hear. Hollis's eyes flicked toward the dark corners where cameras sleep. Cute, he said. No, he reached for Xavier's wrist. Rook moved. The sound he made when he hit Hollis was not loud, but it was definitive, the thud of physics applied to entitlement. 2 patrol officers flowed in from the bay's edge, hands already turning Hollis toward the trunk, arms behind his back. Hollis swore, the eloquent version. The folder slipped, the pen skittered like a fleeing insect. You're under arrest, an officer said, and read things off that men like Hollis consider overdramatic until the cuffs click. For attempted extortion, coercion, and conspiracy. Adelaide stepped into the frame, not from the shadows but from the center. And you will be happy to know, she said sweetly, that I have the court on a live line who would like to hear any names you would like to give in exchange for a warmer cell. Hollis laughed. It came out a little ragged this time. You think you've won? He asked. Midnight still comes. Paper still rules. He looked past Adelaide at Xavier. And your mother still has windows. Rook's hand tightened on Hollis's arm until tendons announced themselves. Careful, he said, low. There are some sentences you can't afford. The arrest unfolded with the choreography of men who have practiced safety in a dangerous world. Hollis went to a car. The car went away. The folder and the pen went into bags with numbers. The bay door closed. The air took a breath it hadn't allowed itself since the last time justice happened on the floor beneath a loading sign. Seraphine stepped out from the column. She looked up into Xavier's face like she was calibrating an instrument. Are you hurt? Not by him, he said. His pulse pounded at his temples like a hand on a door. He pressed his palm against the table of his sternum and willed the world to level. Your father's trust doesn't deserve to run my life, he said. But I won't let someone like Hollis run it either. Agreed, she said. She took a breath and released it like a contract torn in 2. I apologize for last night, she said. Not like companies apologize, but like people do when they know they walked into someone's house and rearranged the furniture. The sentence I used had more money than decency in it. I'd like to build a world where I don't know how to speak that way. He held her gaze. In it he saw the calculus she had done since childhood, how to be the kind of person the world obeys without becoming the kind of person she despises. Thank you, he said. The words were simple and replaced something brittle inside him with something malleable. Now what? Now, Adelaide said from behind them, we go upstairs. We file our motions. We request an emergency hearing at 9 a.m. We request that the court order witnesses to preserve devices. And we discuss the clause. The clause, Seraphine repeated. She turned to Xavier. If you said yes. I haven't, he said, and the gentleness cost him more than a sharpness would have. I won't say yes to end a threat. I'll only say yes if we build a sentence together that doesn't end with a period shaped like power. She absorbed that and nodded. Then come upstairs, she said. We'll build it. They returned to Conference North because some rooms become altars when both truth and risk are carried across their threshold. Rook stood inside the door, not overbearing, simply present. Adelaide dialed a number that carried them into the bone-white light of evening court. A judge appeared on the screen, a woman whose hair had gone white for reasons that had nothing to do with age. She listened to Adelaide's presentation the way farmers listen to weather. Then she looked at Xavier and Seraphine. Mr. Rafik, she said. Do you need anything from this court to prevent your employer from ruining your life while this matter proceeds? Xavier glanced at Adelaide, who offered him the barest, proudest nod. Just this, he said. In order that anyone trying to tie my job to my relationship status is breaking the law, and that anyone threatening my family is going to meet your face. The judge's mouth turned, the way stone turns when water speaks to it for 100 years. Granted, she said. She signed something that moved as pixels across a screen and as a new boundary across a dozen men's plans. Now, Ms. Cade, your trust. Seraphine stood. My father believed control could be tested by rings, she said. He was wrong about women and wrong about love. I intend to comply with the clause because I will not let men like the one you just heard about set this company's weather. But I will not coerce or be coerced. She looked at Xavier, not the judge. If Mr. Rafik agrees to marry me, it will be because we both choose to. If he does not, I will forfeit control and fight in the open. The judge held her eyes for 3 beats that contained a career. Then you will file your intent, not as a declaration but as a notice of principle, she said. And you will ensure no one is forced to be a symbol who prefers to be a human. She banged her gavel not like a threat but like a seal. After, the room emptied without anyone moving. The clock on the wall said 12:31 a.m. The building made the sounds buildings make at that hour, when their lives are the lives of pipes and the men and women who watch them. Walk with me, Seraphine said. She didn't wait for agreement. She opened the door and stepped into the silent corridor where the meteor hung. They stopped beneath it. The net of metal looked almost soft when the midnight lights were the only lights left. A year ago, she said, I looked at this and thought, that's what I do. I catch falling things and call it leadership. She looked at him. But sometimes the thing that falls is a person with a name. And catching becomes holding. And holding becomes ownership. I don't want to be that. You were that last night, he said. He didn't say it to wound. He said it the way climbers talk about a handhold that broke. I was, she said. And I am sorry. She straightened, not as a defense but as a brace. If I ask you now, I do not know if I'm asking because I want to win or because I want to make something good out of something that almost became bad. I don't know which is worse. He watched her with the same attention he used on stains, on corners, on grout lines where neglect hides. Ask me anyway, he said. Not with money behind it. Not with fear. She inhaled. Xavier and Rafik, she said. Will you marry me so that this company stays in hands that will not punish people for being poor, and so that you and I can find out if there is something here that isn't just strategic? And if the answer is no, I'll still protect your family with everything I have. And I will mean it. He looked at the meteor. He looked at his hands, which had learned to turn mops into instruments and anger into work. He thought of his mother's tea, of Camel's scholarship, of Rook's hand heavy on a bad man's arm, of Adelaide's sentences that cut like surgeons. He thought of Seraphine stepping into smoke when she could have called it someone else's job. Yes, he said. It came out like a floor settling after a storm. He did not look away. But on terms. Name them, she said. First, he said, this is not forever if forever isn't right. We do a 1-year civil marriage with a sunset clause that lets either of us walk without a fight. Second, no money changes hands that changes us. You don't buy my yes with a line item. You'll help my mother regardless, as a citizen, not as my owner. He swallowed. Third, if this becomes something real, we revisit every word we're about to write with the generosity of people who learn to be better in the space of a year. She nodded, once, like a door opening to a room filled with light. Agreed, she said. Fourth, he said, I choose the witnesses. He smiled for the first time in hours, slow and a little foolish. Rook and Nor. They saw me when I was no one. Seraphine's mouth bent into a smile that had nothing to sell. Done, she said. They went back to the operations room because some vows begin where plans were born. Rook blinked like a man who had been prepared for one kind of battle and was now being invited to a party. Me, he said, which in his language meant, I will stand between you and anything with teeth. Nor arrived in sneakers and a blazer she kept on the back of her chair for moments when the building asked too much. She took one look at Xavier's face and nodded with the pragmatic tenderness of someone who believes in both work and wonder. I brought a pen, she said, then looked at Adelaide, and I am aware of the number of ways that sentence can go wrong. Adelaide drafted the agreement, clean, plain, the kind of document that would make law students write in the margins, be this brave. They stood together in conference north with the water wall whispering, for signatures like compass points on a page, a small city clerk on a laptop screen yawning and then straightening when she recognized the names, a registry number rolling into a database like a bead rolling into a string. By the power vested in me by the state, the clerk said, and they all laughed a little because the power vested in her felt like a folding chair compared to the marble of this room, and yet the word power listened to her anyway. You're married. No one kissed. It wasn't that kind of movie yet. Rook clapped Xavier on the shoulder with enough force to make his bones remember that they are a frame. Nor cried with a sound that made the ceiling forgive itself for being so high. Adelaide took photos of the document like a mother who knows proof saves futures. Seraphine looked at Xavier and then looked away, not because she was shy, but because some moments are better when they do not try to declare themselves too loudly. At 1:17 a.m., Galen Armitage walked into Conference North without knocking. He looked from the clerk's dissolving rectangle to the signatures to the witnesses who had never been invited to stand this close to wood this expensive. He blinked twice, like a dragon seeing rain for the first time. You cannot be serious, he said. I have seldom been more so, Seraphine said. We filed our counter. The court granted protections. We apprehended your fixer. She paused, savoring the smallest slice of the moment. We chose. Galen's lips thinned, a cut that refused to bleed. This is a scandal, he said. A janitor? You will drive the brand into the river. Write that sentence down, Adelaide said. Her politeness had the freshness of paper cut from new stock. So I can use it in a hostile work environment suit and an ethics complaint. Galen's gaze slid to Xavier with the disdain of people who assign value by elevator access. Enjoy it while it lasts, he said. The market eats fairy tales for breakfast. Xavier held his gaze and found, to his surprise, no need to look away. The market doesn't eat, he said. People do. Galen left. He managed to make the door sound insulted without touching it hard. By 2 a.m., the building began to remember how to be a building without alarms. Rook escorted Xavier to the lobby because old habits are better than hubris. The steel letters in the lobby did not change, but their meaning shifted slightly to the left in Xavier's mind, the way words can when you've learned a new language overnight. We turn impossible into process. Outside, night had thinned to the shade of blue that pretends to be morning 2 hours early. The police cruiser guarding the curb rolled down a window, a hand lifted. The nurse from the clinic texted a photo, his mother asleep, machines humming like lullabies. Nor texted, Camel says he's going to be obnoxious about being your best man next time. Xavier smiled into the cold. Seraphine stood on the steps a few feet away, hands in her coat pockets, hair slightly less perfect than it had been an hour before. She looked not like a CEO, not like a sculptor of capital, but like a person with a name standing in weather. Coffee, she asked. Tea, he said. My mother would haunt me if I said coffee. They walked to the corner cart where the man had been selling warmth by the cup to 3 generations of people moving from job to job. The vendor raised his brows at the oddness of night, the oddness of their 2 faces side by side. Congratulations, he said, as if the city itself had told him. The city always knows. On being awake. They stood there while the steam rose like proof that some parts of the world behave. They sipped. They didn't speak for a while. They didn't need to. The quiet felt like the first honest thing all day. "What now?" she asked finally. "Now we work," he said. "You keep the company human. I keep the floors clean. We teach men like Galen that people with badges that open early doors and people with keys to supply closets are made of the same carbon." He looked sideways at her. "And we learn each other in daylight." She nodded. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "The part where the thing isn't a deal." "I do," he said. "A mop doesn't negotiate with dirt. It just keeps going." She laughed, not the sharp, performative laugh she used on stages, but the one she must have used when she was young and the world still surprised her kindly. She sobered. "You know they'll come again," she said. "The board. The rumor. The men who like to make gravity for women they can't control." "I know," he said. "But now they have to go through Rook, and Noor, and Adelaide, and my mother, and a judge who doesn't blink, and a nurse who makes parathas sing, and me." He lifted his cup. "And you." She lifted hers. Their paper cups touched. It made no sound, and yet the sound was everywhere. Dawn arrived without asking permission. The city woke. Trucks made their declarations. Office lights put their makeup on. Somewhere, a man who used to move in shadows called a lawyer and said a name to save his skin. Somewhere else, a boy opened an email that said scholarship and forgot to breathe for a second before starting again. In a small apartment, a mother who'd slept 2 hours without pain woke and checked her door to find 2 new locks that closed more softly than the old one. In a courthouse, a petition met its match in a counter that spoke in the grammar of courage. At 8:58 a.m., Seraphine and Xavier stood in the lobby while cameras gathered like insects invited to a flower. He looked at the lights and did not flinch. She looked at the microphones and did not perform. Adelaide stood to the side, arms crossed, counting the seconds until she would say the sentence that would slip under the day and hold it up. "Good morning," Seraphine said. "Last night someone tried to use fear to decide our lives. We've chosen something else. We chose law. We chose each other's dignity. And yes, we chose to marry, not to feed rumor, but to starve a clause that mistakes control for love. If you want a scandal, you will be disappointed. If you want a story about 2 people who insisted on being people in the middle of money, you may subscribe." A reporter's hand rose like a bird landing on a wire. "Miss Cade, why am—" "Because he tells the truth when it's inconvenient," she said. "Because he kept calm when power behaved like a child. Because he saved 2 engineers without checking their titles first. Because he looked at me last night and didn't see a ladder or a vault. He saw a person who needed to be told no and then given a chance to be better." Another hand. "Mr. Rafiq, what do you say to people who think you married into money?" "I've been married to work my whole life," he said. "This is the first time work asked nicely." The crowd laughed. He let it, then added, "Also, my mother will tell you no one marries into money. They marry into responsibilities." After the press conference, after the emails that call themselves statements, after the lawyer's calls and the board's texts and 1,000 other noises, Xavier stepped into the elevator alone. He pressed 28. The doors closed. He stared at his reflection and saw not a janitor-turned-husband or a husband-turned-symbol. He saw a man who had stood in a room with a mop and said no and then said yes and managed to make both mean the right things. The doors opened. The meteor hung. The net glinted. From the corner, Rook lifted a hand. From the corridor, Noor sent him a thumbs up. From the conference room, Adelaide looked up and mouthed, "Eat." He went to work. That night, after a day that would be written and rewritten by people who weren't in the rooms they'd talk about, he went home. His mother fussed about the bandage and then stopped, suddenly, and put her hands on his face and said, "My son is stubborn." "Good." Kamel spun a pen like a baton and tried to act like he had always expected this. the nurses folded their equipment like origami and left behind a quiet that did not feel like absence. At the window, the city leaned its shoulder against the glass like a friend. He looked at the reflection of his own face and the faint outline of a woman's profile beside it when he held his phone up to the window to talk about nothing, the good kind of nothing you talk about when you are very tired and very alive. Today was long, she said. Tomorrow will be longer, he said. Good, she said. He smiled. Good, he echoed. Outside, somewhere many floors below and one city block over, a man cursed into a phone because the file he'd kept hidden had been found by a paralegal with a sense of humor and a memory for dates. In a jail cell, Hollis stared at a ceiling he could not invoice. On a board agenda, a vote vanished. In a trust document, a clause's teeth dulled slightly under the patient chew of real life. And in a city built to measure value in screens and crises, a janitor, husband now, still a son, set his alarm for 4:30 a.m., because floors do not clean themselves. He lay down, closed his eyes, and slept like a man who had chosen every important word himself. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.